All right, we might open it up to the audience now if anyone's got any questions for Lisa. Yes.
Hi, Lisa.
Hello.
John.
Hi.
Excuse me.
Oh, pardon me. Thank you. Hello, Wendy
Hi.
John. I'm a student of journalism at UTS
Yep.
at the moment. When it's so important for a journalist to be unbiased, and I'm heartened to hear that you don't know the voting preferences of some of your staff.
Yep.
How do we remain unbiased and also have an expectation to be active on social media with our opinions?
I actually don't think you need to be active on social media with opinions. I think, well, in particularly Twitter is a cesspit of just horrible individuals who think they're keyboard warriors. I understand the need to be opinionated if you're a columnist, but one of the challenges that I'm finding with the newsroom currently is that people, I mean, of course everyone's entitled to the opinion, I don't try to shut it down, but when people will take any opportunity they can to be critical of a Herald journalist, or any journalist I would assume, but I'm just talking about the Herald. It is so important that you are viewed as objective and can report for either sides. There's a real difference between there's a real difference between casting an opinion in 120 characters and writing a considered piece that is 500 words or whatever length of time, and properly being able to argue a point based on some objective facts. I think reporters have got into trouble by trying to be too smart by half, really getting some, I don't know why people think that getting 50 retweets is so exciting. Maybe it's a generational thing by some excellent millennials, or, I actually think there's a generation of people who would be older than me, who really sort of like that. And it's fine for political. I think once you read it to a certain experience level, you are smart enough to. Like Kate McClymont often, I adore her. She's a dear friend as well as a wonderful Herald journalist. But she can hit the line, like she knows she does, but she also stops to think before she does it. And when she's going to be critical or whatever, she does it in areas that she is an expert in. I had this conversation yesterday with our sports editor actually about, an experience he had in the past of a young soccer reporter who had said some really, and like all power to him, he'd said all these things on Twitter about the Palestinian football team. He was covering a World Cup, I think. Asian Cup. I can't remember. He was covering some event. This was many years ago. And then went to the training session beforehand. So he wrote all this stuff and he got flamed from both sides, and it was just like, you're a football writer. Do you really have the political insight to make a judgment about the Israel-Palestine conflict? I don't think so. But then what he had done was gone to the press conference, the pre-match press conference, and because he was so determined to make his own political statement or his own kind of assessment of the situation, he kind of forgot all about the football. And had written, and my sports editor said he ended up cutting this. The story was filed at about 1,500 words of this sort of diatribe of God knows what, with a few quotes in it. But once he'd cut the stuff out that was actually not important, it was a 350-word story. Yet his competitor at The Guardian at that time had interviewed the captain, who had talked about how he had been unable to go to. He'd only been able to go to one of the 10 training sessions because of the roadblocks, the situation in Palestine. So the person in the story made the statement that this young clown was trying so hard to make from himself, but actually get the people involved to tell the readers the story. So I think there are much more sophisticated ways to do it. And Peter Harcher will have his opinions, but he doesn't make personal attacks unless they're really justified. He doesn't bang a particular ideological drum. That's not for us to do, I don't think. And I just think the social media, the sugar hit that people might think they get from feeling popular when they get retweeted on Twitter is actually just not useful at all for, proper journalism, in my humble opinion. So I really try and discourage it, actually. Unless, as I say, unless they're promoting their work, which is a more, an opinion piece they've written. I just don't think it's helpful.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Yes.
Lisa, my name is Zia Ahmed. I'm the editor of the Australasian Muslim Times. I've been reading the Herald since my arrival in Australia in 1971 at an age of 18.
Yes.
And really I'm still reading.
Great.
Over the years, I've really found Herald to be very objective and very balanced. And we were talking about left and right.
Yep.
I think maintaining that very well. I occasionally have been writing letters to editor. Had a 70% success rate in getting published.
Doing well.
First time it was, I think, 1979.
Oh, wow. Great.
Yes, it goes a long way back.
Yeah.
Now, in this digital age, what I want to ask you is that you had to balance access to your stories on your website. At the same time, you want people to subscribe to it. Australian newspaper, for example, it does not give access to stories, one or two, and then you have to...
Yeah.
So what do you think? Do you think that if you give access to your website to stories, that means that people don't subscribe because it's available? But at the same time, you're getting a lot of people reading it. So from a revenue point of view, which is better?
Yeah, so the priority is going to become, and we're trying to do it in a way that is, so one of the things I talk a lot about is wanting to be able to make more secure. So the problem we have, and it's with all these things, it's a technology problem more than a sort of business case problem. Because our 5 digital sites, so the Sydney Morning Herald, the Age, the Canberra Times, the Brisbane Times and WA Today, are all published on the same, they call it Quinn Publishing. So I'm going to give you all a tip, but you are not to listen to me at all when I say, if you want to read a story on the Sydney Morning Herald, this isn't well known, so I'm not really speaking out of school, and you've hit your word limit, you've hit your number, you can just go to that bit that says www.smh and change that to the Age or the Canberra Times or and you can read that exact same story, because when a story is published on the Herald, it's published on all 5 of those sites. The problem with that is, well, as we joke, the Canberra Times has a bigger digital readership than people live in Canberra. So the entire ACT. That's a bit of an issue for us, because obviously ourselves in the Age primarily want to be subscriber, we want to have a subscriber revenue base. The Canberra Times is going to really start pushing that model as well. But when you don't have a newspaper, so the WA and Brisbane, and they are free sites, to suddenly start restricting on there is going to really be quite detrimental to their viability commercially for advertising. So there's just a whole lot of competing interests there. What I'd really like to see is, so I've been banging on about this for ages and no one seems to listen to me, but I'm going to keep saying it until someone does at work. If I was I'll keep using him. If I was a Harcher fanatic and all I wanted to read on the Herald was his 2 columns a week. So he writes 2 columns a week for 4 weeks for your 30 days. That's only 12. Currently our paywall is at 15. So you could still read, I think, the best political and international affairs commentator in the country for free. I don't think that's right. So I think that after, we are getting more and more information on who's reading what, so that pop-up to subscribe or being blocked from reading something should kick in much earlier if the habit shows that that's what you're reading. Of course, that would have to apply to all those sites, because again, you're to Canberra Times, reading it on the Canberra Times site. So that for me is the real balance. It's about trying to put the journalism at the centre of the sort of commercial proposition. And I think the paywall will come down again. There's been no decision about it, but I think it makes sense to do that. But we also really want to keep the conversation alive in the community about, if you want our kind of journalism to continue, which we do, and I think a lot of people do, then you've just got to pay for it. It's really not very expensive. You know, a coffee a week or something, I think someone told me the other day. Depends how expensive your coffee is, I suppose. But, you know, our most popular sort of package is the digital through the week and a paper or two on the weekend. And, you know, I don't see why that... And that's not a prohibitive cost, I don't think, for most people. It's just about getting them to pay. Hi.
Hi, Lisa.
Good to see you.
Thank you. So I understand breaking news, but I'm keen to get your feedback on how you and the newsroom basically selects slow-moving stories. I mean, stories that are developing over weeks and months, sometimes even years. How do you decide that, yes, this is a story worth telling?
There's probably different answers to that question depending on what area they're in. It's a lot about gut instinct and experience, I think. So when Kate McClymont comes and tells me that she's got some, she's been looking into this thing and this person who's been doing this and he owns these companies, and, you know, her experience and sort of instinct will tell her that this is something worth pursuing, as well as information she's getting from other sources and what have you. And that can last, I mean, you know, a long, long time. I mean, one of the most powerful moments in the newsroom that I've had since being at the Herald, and this happened before I was editor, was when Eddie Obeid, the former state government minister, was actually jailed. Darren, former editor-in-chief, called everyone around the newsroom and made Kate was actually on the phone doing an interview, but made her come and, you know, when she got off the phone, made her come and stand with us. Because I still get goosebumps thinking about it. Kate pursued Eddie Obeid, pursued is probably the wrong word, investigated him for a long time. We had to pay him $200,000 in defamation over a story that turned out years later to be factually true, and that's what he went to largely what he went to jail for. That was over, I think it was something like, in total, 17 years. Kate was, and we gave her a huge round of applause, and, you know, Darren said, this is not for celebrating. I don't want this to be seen as celebrating someone going to prison. That's not what it was about. But it was about recognising that these, you know, journalism has these kinds of, can have these sort of impact. And if you believe something to be true and it's supported by factual evidence, and often you need to check yourself about, are you really got this right, and, you know, but... You know, and then Kate sort of was very emotional about it because, of course, it had been a huge part of her reporting life. And she said, the thing is that you just got to keep going. You know, knock down, get back up again. Like, she had, you know, she's got more lawsuits than I wish she had. But she, you know, she just keeps going. And I think, you know, when it comes to things in sport or in, you know, police rounds or any of the sort of subject areas, I think sometimes you have to give up, and sometimes, you know, but it doesn't mean you have to never think about it again. Just put it away until another piece of information or another sort of aspect to it comes to light. So I haven't probably answered that very well, but it is really hard to sort of say how we make a call. I think we just sort of try to make the best call we can and, you know, judge objectively as possible, assess the information and try and really be clear about the calls of when to just pull back and when to keep going. And it can be really hard, and I'm sure we make wrong calls all the time, but hopefully not too often. May I ask a question? Yes.
Okay, I think this will be our final question. I think we're running out of time, but great questions. Thanks, everybody.
Hi. Christine Hurd.
Yeah,
I'm
hi.
a former journalist.
Yes.
Used to work at SBS.
Yes.
Now a media trainer. I'm curious as to, given the audience in which you're presenting to today, how do you decide on whether or not to interview the people who are really racist? in what they say.
Yeah. So we had an interesting discussion last night, given the maiden speech from the latest MP, Fraser Anning, who has given one of the most horrific speeches I think anyone who's covered politics has ever heard. And there were there was a very main reason why we weren't able to put it in a hugely prominent place in the newspaper. That we moved it from, it was very close to deadline, basically. There was a whole set of reasons, but also I've already this morning been emailing, because I might be a little late to our news conference, about things that I want them to pursue today, because I think so much of what I heard in that speech was factually inaccurate, hugely one-sided, incredibly biased, racist, just so obnoxious. It just makes me quite cross. So I think when people say things that are any of racist or any of those, have to really balance what our response to it must be proportionate to what was said and who will be outraged by it. I think a lot of people will have heard that actually and gone, what an idiot, and just ignored it. Like, I actually don't think a lot of Australia, I mean, yes, a lot of people should be incredibly angry that someone in 2018 has those views, but really, who is that guy? Yes, he has a platform from standing up in federal parliament and saying it, and it will turn into a huge storm, and I'm sure it'll be, and he's already said the criticism is ridiculous. But when you hear the Federal Energy Minister on radio this morning practically in tears being so angry about the way his family had been treated, and you hear other members of Parliament talking about their experience as migrants, and it's like, how could it possibly be that people don't understand the world we live in? So, you know, I've asked for a sort of fact check of the speech. I would like someone in our opinion pages to take a very large bat and get very cross with words. And I'm quite sure we'll do a pretty strongly worded editorial about it. I think it's about calling it out when it's wrong, which is different, of course, to the straight news reporting of it again. And again, it goes back to, you know, the points about opinion. I think we need to keep opinion in opinion and news in news. Like, my dad once asked me what the difference was, and I thought, oh God. I mean, he gets it, but he just sort of, I think, was trying to understand which, you know, how we make those decisions. But I think it's when someone's going to speak like that. I mean, we had to report that because it was said publicly, and we will do our best to cover all of the responses, and also, I think, as a newspaper, take a hard line against anyone saying things like that. But if it's a one-on-one interview with someone who just says a whole bunch of stuff, then maybe we just don't report it, because really that's giving a mouthpiece, a very big one through the Sydney Morning Herald for something that's just not relevant in 2018.
Okay, thank you all for those questions, and thank you, Lisa, for some amazing insights. I'm sure we'll all be buying the paper tomorrow just to read about the response now. I'd now like to call on Anne-Marie McEwen, union organiser from the Independent Education Union of Australia, New South Wales and the ACT, to present a gift to Lisa on behalf of Affinity.
Oh, goodness.
Beautiful.
Oh,
here we are, Lisa.
Thank you.
On behalf of the audience and Affinity, would like to thank you very much for this morning.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time. And it was a great opportunity, I think, for Affinity to secure you to come this morning and share your insights.
I'm very grateful, and thank you for asking me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks so much. That's really great. Thank you. Thank you. That was great.